Yeah.
Well, today on UVA Legends podcast, I have Ray Roberts, one of the greatest players in the history of UVA football. I guess one of 9 UVA players to get drafted. The first 10 players picked in the NFL draft. Graduated in 1991, had an 11-year NFL career. Played with a good buddy of mine, my high school basketball teammate, Chris Warren. And anyway, Ray, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. And I didn't know that you went to high school with Chris Warren.
Yeah, Chris and I played in the same backcourt. And then, as a matter of fact, I was a year ahead of Chris Warren, NFL Hall of Fame nominee, also a Seattle Seahawk. Chris was a year behind me, and he was playing the 2 guard, and then I was the starting point guard. And at some point, Chris is coming off the bench, and at some point, Coach said, "This guy is too good to be on the bench." So we just had too many big guys on the team. So they moved Chris in for me. And I became 6th man. Chris became the 2 guard. And then the next year, he was all-state basketball player as a post player, as well as football, as you know.
Yeah. Chris is a phenomenal. Like anytime someone asks me like, who's like one of the best athletes you've ever played with, Chris is always like one of the top 1 or 2 people that I talk about.
It's just so effortless for him. The rest of us have to work. I mean, everything comes easy to him.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
Well, look, offline, we were just talking about, and I didn't realize this. Your son just finished at UVA, I believe, and he was also a big guy, about the same size you were when you went to UVA, and didn't play football. Let's how did that work out? I'm sure they were trying to get him out there.
Yeah, so he kind of tooled around in football, through Little League and a little bit in high school, and then he graduated. He played for a high school football team out here that was pretty good, and he was probably about, when he graduated high school, probably like 6'7", about 320 pounds. And when he walked on the campus on the grounds at UVA, my phone started ringing. And they were like, why isn't this guy playing football? And but he was just never really, he liked playing. He liked being on the court. He played basketball too. But he just kind of, it was more like a social thing. Like he liked being around his buddies and stuff like that. But he hadn't really like bought into the idea that like this is what he wanted to do. And so they brought him over to the athletic department, kind of talked to him for a little bit. And then he, I was like, if you can convince him to do it, he'll do it. But I'm pretty sure he's not going to. And then he ended up being the student manager for like 4 years. So he was still around the team, really got connected with the offensive line coach, Coach 2J. He and Coach 2J are really good friends. A lot of good guys on the team, like really respected him, and they became his buddies and stuff like that. So, but yeah, he never played, and now he's lost almost 100 pounds. Like he's down to like 220 pounds. He was about 340 when he left UVA.
Wow. So I met you at Slaughter playing pickup basketball. And you were a good basketball player. But was your son also a basketball player with that kind of size, or was it not?
Yeah, he if his conditioning was better at that size, he could have been a much better basketball player. Like now he's like 220 playing like in these rec leagues and stuff, going like, Dad, man, if I had just like, I said, well, I kept trying to tell you to lose a little weight, man. Like, you'd be able to do some things, but no, he enjoyed, his high school stuff. He has good friends and all that kind of stuff. And he's doing some work for a buddy of mine in Salt Lake City right now. So he's enjoying life.
That's great. It reminds me of a story that Steve Spurrier, he was asked at a press conference whether Trey Johnson, I guess he'd retired and came back out of retirement, whether he was in shape. And Steve Spurrier says, well, when you're 300 pounds, you're never in shape.
Exactly. I can remember having like knee surgery, and when I was with Detroit, and when you had ACL surgery, it's a while before you can do any kind of conditioning. And then all of a sudden I got this call from my agent, and he's like, yeah, Coach Ross just called me, said that there's just more of you on the table. I was like, of course it is. Like, I haven't been able to do any kind of conditioning, for like 2 or 3 months. Like, it was just kind of funny.
Definitely was. Well, Ray, I know you're passionate about the UVA football team. I've heard you interviewed about the team over the years, and I know you had some challenges with Mendenhall. I don't think you're into the whole Zen thing. And so we have a new coach, Tony Elliott, has a great background, Clemson offensive coordinator, assistant head coach, looks like he's learning from the best. He walked on and was a contributor there as well. Engineer, smart guy. I mean, he checks all the boxes. I met him at the Black Alumni Weekend. It just seems like a great guy. How do you feel about the transition, and what do you think about the team this year?
You know what? I have had a chance to talk to Tony one-on-one, and then also we had a call where he had just a small group of us on the call, and like you said, he does check all the boxes, and I like the way that he is really engaging the alumni. And then I also like the blitz that they put on the state of Virginia. Like, that was one thing that, like, I can remember talking to Bronco, and I'm just like, man, like, we gotta win. We have to win Virginia. Like, we have to get established in Virginia. And then I was told, well, we're a national university, so we can recruit nationally. I'm like, yeah, like, it's the one thing to get like a dude from Texas if he's like their 10th, 12th, best tackle or something, but you can get Virginia's #1 tackle who's going to be way better than that. So it's just, that part of it is super exciting to me, and then some of the guys they have on the staff, obviously Chris Slade, and Chris Slade, knows what it takes to be successful in that league and knows what it takes to recruit those kids in Virginia. And he's had a good high school coaching career himself. So I like all that stuff I like the coaches that they brought in, like the types of coaches that they brought in around like discipline and getting the most out of little, where they've coached at before. And so, obviously trying to rebuild offensive line, it was a little disappointing that some of the dudes bolted, but it is what it is, but I think if they had stayed around, the team would be in much better shape, especially on the offensive line. But I think that's probably going to be where they're going to maybe have the biggest struggle, is rebuilding the offensive line and finding the players there, because they're probably going to have to play some young dudes.
Yeah, I know Chris Slade is a really good friend of yours. The first time I saw him play was at AAU tournament. U-Haul was officiating. Him and Terry Kirby were on Boo Williams' team. And this guy was just a warrior. He was a couple years behind you, just a great player. You played against him and practice at UVA a lot, and you guys would go at it from what I hear. And then in the NFL, you guys had to go against each other as well. And I know that was tough on you guys because you're such good friends. As a matter of fact, I believe one of your kids' name is Slade. That's how close you guys are. Do you think Chris is a candidate to be a head coach one day at a university?
I think it probably depends on like what his goals are. You know what I'm saying? Like, because the head coach, when you're a head coach at the university, like sometimes it's less coaching and more managing. You know what I'm saying? And like for me, myself, I like coaching. Like I tried head coaching in high school, which is a little bit different, but dealing with parents and all this other kind of stuff and the administration and all that. And I'm just like, no, I just want to come, show up, coach the big uglies, and then go. Like that's what I want to do. And so never had any more intentions to be like a head coach. And I would imagine that Chris seems like more of a boots on the ground type of guy, and so to move to head coach, I don't know if that maybe coordinator or something like that, but I don't know. He seems more like a boots on the ground type of dude, and so. But it'd be great to see. And yeah, my son that graduated from UVA is named Slade, and and so I mean I can just. There's no other name he could have had. Like I was like, my first son is going to be named Slade. I'm sorry. Like that's just what it is.
Well, he's a great guy, great athlete. Done university proud. Well, I know you're from Asheville, North Carolina, and I don't know much about Asheville. What I do know is people from the DC area, they love to go vacation down there. They love the outdoor stuff down there. It's got a vibrant art culture. Yeah. I know I've read recently. Asheville did something I haven't heard of anyone else doing, is they granted reparations to the African American community. Not so much payments, but in terms of I guess employment opportunities and real estate zones and those kind of things. Sounds like a fascinating place. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Asheville, North Carolina, and growing up there?
Yeah, well, it wasn't that place when I when I was growing up. It was a lot of racial tension in that area, and we used to have like Christmas parade, and then like a few weeks after that, it'd be like Klan marches and stuff like that, so it's just like, it wasn't as everybody inclusive friendly when I was growing up, but over the years, it has matured into like a really cool place to hang out. Like, not saying that they don't still have, race issues like everybody else, but like when I go home, I stay downtown. Like, it's some really cool hotels. The restaurant scene is great. They have breweries and there's live music everywhere. Every summer they have like this big, huge, inclusive weekend. And so it's just like they shut down the whole city, and it's just like music and art and street performers and just everybody just out having a great time. The last time I was there, Bob Marley's son was like the headliner. And so it was just like the vibe was just incredible. Like, there was no fighting or arguing or nothing. It's just like everybody, just all races, genders, backgrounds, cultures, just the whole city just down having a great time. And so it has really matured into like a really cool place to go hang out and do some cool things. Like, one of the coolest things that I witnessed that I never knew that they do there is like on Thursday evenings, there's like a little bus transfer area in the middle of town. And it's almost built like an amphitheater, the way the steps are and stuff. And so everyone will fill in the stairs, and they bring drums that you can play. It can't be like the stick drums, it has to be like the hand drums, and it's called a drum circle. And so this one dude will be down in the front, and he'll just start a beat, and then everybody else just kind of gets in with the flow of it. And so I was just walking by, and I was like, I wonder what's going on. And so I just sat down, and this lady was telling me about it. So I'm like, well, hey, can I borrow your drum then? So like, I was like right into it too. But it's something they do like every Thursday evening, and it's just called a drum circle. And people just up dancing around, and the police, like during like that time, like there's no smoking of any kind or drinking of any kind during the drum circle. So they just kind of make sure that that's not happening, but they just let people just kind of do what they do. It's really kind of artsy, hippie kind of a thing, but it's really, really cool. It's like very like, to me, it's like symbolic of how, if you really wanted to, we all can be on the same rhythm. You know what I'm saying? We can be from different places, different energies, different backgrounds, different things going on in our lives, different ages, colors, and you can find the same rhythm, and that's what I like about it. It's so every time I go home now, I make sure that I get up there to that.
So what are the cultures, if you compare the cultures from Eastern Carolina and Western Carolina, like it's typical in the Appalachian areas of the South, it's more working class. They didn't have the big farms and the huge Black populations of the descendants of slavery. Mm-hmm. And then also the big cities where you had a lot of huge Black population. Usually the Appalachian portions of these states are different. Is the culture in Western Carolina much different than the culture in Eastern Carolina, or even Charlotte area, which is more of the southern part of the state?
Yeah, I think so, because Asheville's more of a retirement town. Like, there's a lot of like wealthy people there, but it's like old money. It's not like big, huge, corporations and things in Asheville where people are just raking it in. It's like it's a workers town. Like, your people work hard, and then a lot of the wealth in the area is just like from people there's a lot of people that come up from Florida and have retirement homes up in the mountains and stuff like that. And but this is more of a hard work, earn your way kind of town. And the city, it's kind of growing a little bit. There's some things that are going on, but for the most part, it's like I said, it's the entertainment part of it, like the music and the breweries and things like that. But it's not a huge industry there that is gonna, and that might be one of the, I guess, not downfalls, but one of the not so great things about it. If you're a young person, you want to live in Asheville, there's not a whole lot of places to go where you can make good money and build a career and things like that. So a lot of times people have to leave and then come back, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Well, speaking of working, you seem to be heavily influenced by your parents, who are working people. And I know that you had some important decisions to make in your life. And even as a man, you would your dad was involved, and probably your mom too, in big decisions that you made. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your parents and how they raised you and what they meant to you?
Yeah, so I grew up. I'm the youngest of four. I have three older sisters, and so in our little house there was we had about 700 square feet, and it was me and my sisters, my mom, my dad, and my grandfather. So I shared a room with my grandfather. So our living room was so small I could probably go like this and touch both walls. So, and I was the remote control for the family because we had the old clicker TV, and you had to put the vice grips on it because the button was broken, and my dad would be like, change that channel, boy. And I'm like, okay, fix the antennas, all that kind of stuff. And but no, my parents, the one thing I liked about my parents is that my dad worked hard, and he worked hard for everybody. And when I say everybody, there wasn't anyone in our community that my dad wouldn't just drop what he was doing and go help them. And we had nothing. Like, I promise you, like, we were probably the poorest family in the neighborhood. But my dad would give you the shirt off his back. He'd give you the skin off his back if he could. And sometimes you'd be like, dang, Dad, like, we need this. And now you're going to help them. But that's just kind of who he was. And I noticed that, you know what I'm saying? That was important to him, that he could show up for people that way. And I really admired that about him. Like, it made it like we would go anywhere and my dad knew everybody. And it didn't matter if we're like back in the woods and the good old boys saw him, or if we're like downtown, like in a poker house or fixing cars or whatever. Everybody knew, my dad knew everybody. And then my mom was a lot the same way, just really cared for other people and knew that we didn't have much, but if we could help somebody, we help somebody. And they've always loved me. And my parents never graduated like middle school, so my dad was a janitor and my mom was a janitor my dad was a janitor at the middle school. My dad was a janitor at middle school. My mom was a janitor at the elementary school. And so they worked really, really hard. And then my dad did all these other kind of odd and end jobs to make ends meet. And but the one thing about my dad was that he made sure that we did our schoolwork. Like, he was a big into the education thing. Like, there were times in like Little League where he would be like, yeah, you can't practice today. Like, you got to C or whatever it is. You got to get these grades better. Or like, even when we do our homework, he would just look at it to see if he could read it. He wanted to make sure your handwriting and stuff is clear so the teacher can read it. If it wasn't, you have to do it all over again. And this could be like 10 minutes before you have to get to school. And he's like, you're trying to rewrite it all over, So he was just like really into that stuff. As long as my grades were great, then he would support me, in anything I did. And then I don't know if my parents ever missed anything that I've ever done, like a play in school or, any type of thing that we had going on in school, football, basketball. I don't know if they've ever missed. That was one cool thing about being in Virginia, because at the time all the schools were like North Carolina, South Carolina and Virginia, and so they could drive to all the games, and they never missed anything, and that was important too, to be able to look up into the stands and know that, like, yeah, my parents are here, and so that was pretty cool too. So my parents, and then for me, like, I just took on the same mantra that my dad took on. So when I retired, my kids were young, but I wanted them to see me getting up in the morning and going to work and coming home. And so I found a job where I was out the door before they went to school. And then I was coming home after they got home from school, so they could see me leaving and see me coming. So that they understood that work is part of what you got to do. And now my kids, like, during the summers when they were in high school, they were working, like, college, they were working. Now they're working. They do 2 or 3 different things. Like, and I just know that would make my dad proud if he could see them kind of taking on his mentality around work.
Well, were you always big, and were you good in sports right away, or did you have to work at it?
No, football just kind of came naturally to me. And I started out as a running back. And so, like, in Little League, I was a running back, and our uniforms were the same color as the Minnesota Vikings. And they had this running back, Chuck Foreman.
I love Chuck Foreman.
Number 44. And so I wore number 44. And like, when I would run the ball in my head, I would be playing the Monday Night Football music. And like, I felt like when I was hearing the music, like nobody could tackle me. And I felt like, even though I was running, I felt like I was in slow motion because the thing would always be in slow motion. And then when I got to like about 8th or 9th grade, you know, we're going out to football, and I'm running over towards the running backs, and the dude was just like, just gave me one of those, like, nah, bro. And so I looked down, and I'm like, yep, I guess I'm on this line thing. And so I started playing defense, and I was a defensive end all the way through high school, and I played a little bit of offensive tackle, and then also played basketball. And so my dad, before AAU, my dad would get all the kids that didn't make the junior high and high school basketball teams, like the men's and women's teams, and he had his own rec teams because he had access to the gym at the middle school. He would just run all those practices down at the middle school. So the kids that didn't make the teams, he made teams out of them, and came up with his own drills. My dad never played basketball in his life. Came up with his own drills, took a Volkswagen van, fixed it up to make it the team bus. And so he would drive teams all over the state of North Carolina and play. And they'd come home with these big, huge trophies where they've won championships. My mom would make jerseys and stuff like that. And so I just played for my dad. And so then my friends were like, man, you need to come play for us. You're killing us in gym all the time. Like, you need to play for the basketball team. And so my junior year, I went out for the basketball team and played my junior, senior year, and was all conference and all that, and was being recruited for basketball too. But basketball wasn't physical enough for me. Like, I need to I need to hit people, you know. And so actually, when I got to UVA, my first summer there, I was playing basketball in the gym with some of the basketball team, and I caught this alley-oop and dunked it, and Terry Hollins was in there. And then about 2 or 3 days later, I got this call from Coach Welsh, and I had to go talk to him and Terry, and they're like, man, like, if you're going to redshirt first year, you should play basketball. And I was just like, well, I'm just going to tell you, Coach, I'm not going to be just 5 fouls. Like, I want to score some points, you know? And, but then I just knew that, like, for me to try to play 2 sports at UVA, like, I wouldn't graduate. Like, I just know at that time I wasn't disciplined enough academically to take that on. And so I was just like, man, I appreciate it, but I'm a football player, man. And they tried to get me to wrestle. Nah, can't do that either. Like, I'm just going to play football. And so, but I've always played football and basketball. I still think, you know, my old crusty, rickety knees, I still think I got a good jump shot. And I can still beat my kids for the most part if I could just back them down. I can't, like, you know, get around them in the dribbling and stuff. But yeah, I was a pretty good basketball player too.
Who was your high school basketball coach? And what did you learn from him?
His name was Rob Winkle, and he was just like our assistant principal, little short guy. And the one thing I learned from Coach Winkle was just the detail of what we're doing, because we had a really good basketball team. Like, I may have been like the 4th or 5th basketball player on our team, and we just like to get out and run. It's just a bunch of brothers, just throw the ball out on the court. We just gonna run. And then we would do that. And then, you know, obviously, like, when you're doing that, people are just jacking shots up. And next thing you know, a team you should be killing is up by 5 or 6 points. And then that's when he would be like, all right, now you guys did it your way. Let's do it my way. And, you know, and then we had to, like, get to our spots, run our plays, you know, make our cuts, set the screens, make good passes, you know, hit our free throws, all that kind of stuff. And so just his attention to detail, where you can take, like, this uber talented person and put some structure and discipline, not discipline in like getting in trouble, but discipline in how you go about your work around it. And it elevates all of that stuff. And so that's kind of how I went about my whole career. Like, I knew I was a super athletic dude to be, you know, 300 pounds. And I could rely a lot on my athletic ability, but man, I would practice my technique like no other. Like, I just wanted to be, like, technically sound in everything I did. My pad level, my hand placement, my footwork, my balance, like, all that stuff. I just, you know, like, I just wanted all of it to be perfect. So I would just, like, one time I remember I was in my pass set. So if this is my right foot and this is my left foot, like, you want this foot to move first because that gets your body going. And I realized that this foot was moving first. And so I would go out before practice and I would just do this like 200 times. before every practice, just to train my body to make that be the first thing that I do, because all those little details matter. You know what I'm saying? Like it on the film, it looked like I'm only gaining this much ground. You know what I'm saying? But it's actually putting myself in a position to cover this much space where I'm in a much better body position in relation to the defender and the quarterback. And so just like every little detail, like that's kind of became my thing, is just like technique. And a lot of that came from Coach.
Well, you mentioned your team was mostly black, and you also mentioned there was tension in Asheville. Was the school mostly black as well? And was it in the historical black neighborhoods? And was it a historically black school?
No, it was. We were Asheville High is the only city school in Asheville, and so that's the school I went to. And it's probably at the time, or even now, it's probably like 70-30 white to black. Mm-hmm. And but the school itself has always had good energy, good vibe, good sports. The people get along. Our football, basketball teams have always been good. When I was in high school, our girls basketball team won the state championship. A few years later, they won it 3 years in a row. And we were playing at the time when I was there, we were playing in the biggest league, the 4A. I think they're 3A now, but yeah, we've always had good teams and just good energy at the school, and I think it's just gotten better as young people have embraced this idea around inclusion and everybody matters, and taking that kind of stuff seriously. Now, we did run into some issues, like when we'd have to go out to the county and play some of those county schools and stuff like that. Like there were times where like you'd be afraid to win because you don't know if you're going to be able to get out of there or not. You know what I'm saying? And so sometimes that became an issue more than like whatever the tension was at our school.
Yeah. Well, how about your football career? Now you settled in at defensive end. I assume you probably played at least 3 or 4 years of varsity. How'd your team do, and who was your football coach?
Yeah, so we had some lean years when I was there. We normally, when we changed coaches in high school, we would hire somebody from within our program, so it'd be either an assistant coach or someone at the junior high school, because we kind of ran the same stuff all the time. So everyone, when you started in like 8th grade, you knew the plays you're going to be running in 12th grade. That way you can just learn how to play football. You're not so focused on learning plays and stuff. Well, then that Coach Peterson, who was like this legendary coach at our school, he retired. And then they hired this guy, Joe Stedman from South Carolina, which was like the first time they hired someone outside the family, so to speak. Yeah. And he came with a pretty impressive resume. He had been I think he was like an assistant coach at South Carolina, University of South Carolina at one point, and had done some good stuff. But people just didn't buy into the culture that he was trying to build. And so we lost players. So we had these 2 running backs that were really good that were my year, and they just wasn't buying into Coach Stedman. And so they left the team. And so we ended up having to bring up a lot of young dudes. So I think my 1 year we may have won 6 games, and my senior year we may have won 4 games or something like that. But that was all based on just having to play a bunch of, like, we pretty much had to make our varsity. We had to bring our whole JV up to be varsity to have enough players. But Coach Stedman, the cool thing about Coach Stedman is that he recognized in me what was there before I did. Like, I knew I was good at football, but I had no idea. Honestly, this is how little I knew about college, is that I had no idea what recruiting was. I didn't know how you got to play sports in college. I just thought that it was like high school. Like, you got there and you go try out for the team, and you make the team. And so one day I went to the Coach Stedman. I'm like, hey, Coach, this is like the beginning of 11th grade, or about halfway through 11th grade year. And I'm like, hey, I have all these letters from these colleges want me to come play football, but man, we can't afford college. And he was just like, he's like, Ray, like, bring me the letters. And so I had like 2 big bags full of letters. So I walk in there and I'm like, here they are. And he was just like, Ray, like, these people, they want to pay for your college. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, a scholarship means that they pay for everything. All you do is just, you go there and you go to school and you play football, because he had coached at South Carolina. So he's trying to explain it to me. So then I go home and I try to explain it to my dad. And my dad was like, nah, man. he's like, my dad was like, that bill's coming, bro. Like that bill is coming. You ain't getting nothing free like that. It's coming and we can't afford it. So you might as well forget that. So I'm like, well, you need to talk to coach, because coach is telling me that we don't have to pay anything. Like they pay for everything, like the room and board, the books, the gear, like everything. And so it took about a month for my high school coach to convince my dad that this is legit, that we weren't going to have to pay for anything. And so then Coach Stedman was like, well, let's start writing down, like, let's like map all this stuff out. So think about the schools that you like. So we had this whole system of like rating the schools based on social life, based on academic reputation, athletic reputation, location, all the stuff, how if my parents could get to it, like all these different kinds of things. And then he was like, you need to make some goals, like set some goals for yourself. And this is how I'm telling you, dude, like, this is like, I was like, set some goals. What do you mean? Like I'm not a field goal kicker, like, what are you talking about? And he's like, no, like what the things you want to accomplish. And so we were headed to our girls state championship game at Chapel Hill. And it's about a 4-hour drive for us from Asheville. And he had this big legal pad of paper. And so I was riding with him. And so I just put first year of college, this is what I want to do. Second year of college, everything from like social life, grades, athletically, like everything. Like I just, for all 4 years at UVA, I did that. And he's the one that kind of got me pointed in the right. And at the time, I didn't know I was going to UVA. I had actually committed to Tennessee and verbally committed to Tennessee. And then Virginia came in. Coach Wilmer, my man, came and watched me play basketball and was just like, we don't have a defensive lineman like you on our team. And it's like we don't have anybody that can play ball like this, jump, dunk, do all this stuff. Like, we want you on our team, and made me an offer right in the locker room. And so then I'm just like, man, where's this Virginia place? And then went and took a visit. And on my visit, they lost to William and Mary. And on my way home, we're about around Lynchburg. And I told my dad, I think I'm gonna go to Virginia. And he pulled over, like, what? I said, yeah, I think I'm gonna go to Virginia, man. He's like, man, like Tennessee, there's like 90,000 people. We went to the Alabama game and all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, but Dad, I just feel like my personality just fits better at UVA. I had met Shawn Moore, Tony Covington, and Derek Boyd, like, those Ray Savage, those dudes, I just felt like I fit with them. And then I was like, and they just lost to William and Mary. I'm gonna get to play like right away. Little did I know that I was gonna get moved to offensive tackle, but it was the perfect decision for me, because Shawn and Slade and Covington and Ray Savage, like all those dudes, even rest in peace, David Griggs, who was an older dude when I was there, just took me under his wing, and we ended up having the same agent once we got to the league. Those dudes were just lifelong brothers to me. Like, I talked to Shawn probably almost every day, awesome. And so it was the best decision I've ever made. Met the mother of my kids there, was married to her for about 17 years. And so we're still great friends now, but that place, not just athletically and, but it just my whole person just totally changed my life.
Yeah, it was an exciting time to play sports there as well, because UVA never had a sports tradition, and starting in like 78 or so, actually 70, 75, 76 with Wally Walker and then Ralph Sampson, and then the football team started to build with George Walsh in the 80s. And you guys were going to take us to the next level. You mentioned before that you were a relatively poor kid coming up in Asheville in a small house. Charlottesville was a very different town. So, I mean, this is the time when A Different World was on TV and all those rich kids going to a school like that. And I felt UVA was changing about that time. When I first got there, I felt like most of the African Americans, they were middle class, maybe upper middle class, but I felt like there were more rich kids there later on. By the time I finished law school in 91, when you were there, I felt like there were more rich kids there. The culture of the campus had changed a little bit.
Yeah.
What did you think about the culture of UVA? A very tall. You were very young looking when you first got there. I mean, you were big, but you look very young. You had a baby face. Always smiling.
Yeah.
How did you feel when you first got on grounds?
Yeah, I was kind of shocked by it, honestly. Like, a lot of kids like seemed like they had everything that they needed, like driving BMWs and stuff like that. And all the, like, even my roommate, Jason Wallace, was from Hampton, but his dad was like the assistant city manager or something. And his mom was like a school teacher. And I was like, honest to God, Julian, when I showed up, I had a duffel bag about this big, and it had everything I owned in it. Every piece of clothing I had, every one pair of shoes that I had. And so when, we unpacked in our dorms, like I had nothing. And then Jason's mom was like unpacking all his stuff. And she looked at my closet and was like, Ray, like, where are your clothes? I'm like, that's all I have, And so then on her trips back, I guess I had never heard of a big and tall man store. So there was a Casual Male big and tall in Hampton. And so she would like buy me some clothes and then bring them up when she would come up to see Jason. Because otherwise I just wore all the UVA issued gear. So all the sweats and I used the turf shoes as my tennis shoes. Like I had nothing. So I was a little bit culture shock for me, to see all of that stuff and just feel like I had absolutely nothing, but like I said, like the guys on the team were awesome. Jason's parents were just amazing. Like Jason, like I was the biggest dude on the team at one point. He's the smallest dude, but we're the best friends, man. That dude his family is like family to me. And they really took care of me and helped me. But yeah, it took a little getting used to, the kind of, I wouldn't say like I didn't really feel like a whole lot of racial stuff, even though it was kind of there, but just a socioeconomic difference. I was just like, whoa, like, yeah, like this, that ain't how I roll, but okay.
Yeah, well, I think you ended up, I believe, redshirt in your first year.
Yeah,
and you probably would have been able to acclimate yourself better if you were actually playing, because you would have been able to show folks on the field what you were about. But because you weren't playing, it may have made the adjustment a little bit more difficult for you.
Yeah, and actually, like I thought I was gonna be playing because like my first year there, obviously you come in, I was behind like Ford, like I think what's his name? Chris Murdoch, I think it was, and Sean Scott.
Craig Murdoch.
Yeah. And Sean Scott was like this undersized, tough defensive
guy.
Dude. Yeah. And so, I was playing behind those dudes, but I had through the summer, I worked my way up to where the first game against Georgia, I thought I was going to play. And then Coach Welsh and Coach Wimmer came to my room and said that they were going to redshirt me because they, obviously I wasn't strong enough to compete with some of those dudes. And then so I was, at least to our team, I had proven that I could play on that level. But yeah, I think probably having played as a first year player, that would have been a little bit different. But I had a team around me. Like I struggled a little bit academically at first because I just didn't know how to manage my time. And so I was just like, man, I'm going to football practice today. That's it. And so then I got put on like academic probation, and I was just like, I'll do whatever you guys ask me to do, except for go home. Like I'm not going home. And so they're like, all right, well then you don't get to work out and practice with the football team in the spring. Cool. Perfect. And then I got like 3.0 every semester after that. And but yeah, it was an adjustment like all the way around, like just kind of being on your own, been in this different kind of scene where kids just have a lot and I had a little, and then just trying to, work your way into this team that at the time, like, people may not have noticed it, but man, we had some ballers because some of the best players of all time from our university came from that era, and it's a lot of us, myself, Shawn, Slade, Kirby, Covington, Ray Savage, like it was just a bunch of dudes, Herman, Nicky Fisher, like we just had some ballers, man. And Jason Wallace, Tyrone Lewis, like just some really good football players, so it was just trying to find your way was an adjustment too.
Well, to your credit, you also made the all academic team at least 1 year, I think maybe 2 years. So you really did a great job of turning that around. So is during your redshirt year, is that when they moved you to offense?
Yeah. So that whole year you're on the scout team, and I'm killing people on like I'm going against Roy Brown and Chris Manier and all these dudes. And I'm like, I'm doing a good job, And so I can't wait till the next year. Like, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be like, whoever. And then we went on spring break and we came back and, spring practice was about to start. And I could just hear this, like these little whispers in the locker room, like, man, I heard they moving Ray to offense. I'm just like, man, what they talking about? Like, why they moving me to offense? And then we had our little meeting and then Coach Walsh was like, hey, Ray, like, meet me in the office. And so I'm like, okay. So I go to the office. He's like, hey, I think we're going to try you out at left tackle. And I was just like, what? like, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, you have like long arms and quick feet and the left tackle in the NFL is becoming more athletic and important and stuff. We really feel like, you could make that transition. I'm like, yeah, coach, but like, I can sack the quarterback. I can knock down passes. like I'm a tough dude to tackle. Like you have like, all conference dudes like out there struggling with me. And so I was angry. And so I was ready to leave. Like I was going to try to transfer back to Tennessee. And then somehow my dad, I think my roommate, Jason, somebody must have told my parents or something. And then one day I came home from practice and my dad drove a 1969 gold Grand Prix with a black vinyl top. And it was sitting in the driveway by the treehouse because we were standing loud. I'm thinking like, well, that's my dad here. And so I walk in and he was just like, hey, boy, I heard you thinking about leaving. I'm like, I just started crying. Like, Dad, like offensive for like fat dudes that aren't, they can't move. Like I'm one of the best athletes on the team. Like, why they moving me over there? And I want to play defense. And I was crying. And he was like, he said, you gave him your word that you're going to come here and play. So you're going to play wherever they put you and you can accomplish something, whatever you want to accomplish, you can do it on offense. My dad drove 5 hours to have like a 20-minute conversation with me and then got back in his car and drove 5 hours home. And then the rest was history. It was just like, okay, I guess I'm going to be the best offensive lineman they've ever had at this university. And that's just kind of like, honestly, the next day, like my whole mindset just changed. And I was just like, okay, I'm over here. I might as well be the best. Might as well be the best at it. And so that's kind of how I went about it.
Was it tough for Coach Wilmer though? Because he was one of the reasons why you came to UVA.
Yeah.
He's a defensive coach and now he's losing you. Was he conflicted by that?
Yeah, because there were so early on in the transition, like I tried to just like when they first moved me over there, I tried to like just mess up on purpose. And Coach O'Brien was just like, going back to defense. So I'm running across the field and Coach Welsh was like, Roberts, where you going? And I'm like, oh, Obi said I can go back to defense. And then he's like, no, you got to be on offense. So then he and Coach Wilmer were like going back and forth. And Coach Wilmer was like, he's like he's one of my best players. You're taking one of my best guys from him. And so they had their own little thing going back and forth. And I was just like, man, like I just want to play defense. But then Coach Welsh broke it down like this. He was like, we had Ron Mattis here and Ron played defense his entire career. And then we got drafted to Seahawks. They moved into offensive line. And he had a decent, it was a short career, but he played offensive line. If he had played offensive line here, he probably would have been a better draft pick, would have had a longer career in NFL. And then he was like, with you, like you're like the prototype of what they're talking about left tackle would be. You're long, you're tall, you're athletic, quick feet, long arms, all this other kind of stuff. And then I found out later, like years later, after talking to Coach Wilmer, going like, man, what really happened? Like, how did I go from defense to offense? And he said, well, the other piece of it was that we were recruiting Terry Kirby. And Coach Wells said, if we're going to have an all-American running back, we need to have an all-American tackle. And so it was a bigger picture than what I was able to see. And so once Coach Wilmer explained it, I mean, Coach Welsh and then hearing from Coach Wilmer, it all made sense. But at the beginning, dude, I was not feeling it at all. Not like we would run plays and the right tackle was supposed to be pulling to the left side, and I'd act like I misheard the play, and I'd pull, we'd run into each other, stuff like that. And then one time I pulled around the corner, and I think Chris Warren was still on the team at the time because he hadn't been put on probation yet, and freaking came up on Ray Savage, and Ray Savage just lit me up. Bow. And so then that's when I'm like, all right, let me get serious about this because that ain't happening again. Like, ain't nobody put me on my ass. Like that ain't gonna happen again. And so it's a series of little things that kind of just kept focusing my attention and approach to where it was just like, all right, this is where I am. Let me get real about it. And I just want to be the best that ever done it.
If you could, real quickly, can you just tell us the characteristics of the line? Because I'm sure most football fans just see a bunch of big guys beating up on each other.
Right.
Andy Heck told me, I did a interview with Andy Heck as well, probably a Seattle teammate of yours. I think you had.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. He's a line coach of the Chiefs. He said, your offensive linemen are your organized type. We have clean lockers. Our lives are in order. So he said, defensive linemen are a mess. The lockers are crazy. Is there any truth to that? And what are the characteristics of the different line positions? Like the right tackle, he's not as big as the left tackle, not as fast, or?
Yeah, well, I would just say the overall characteristics of offensive linemen is like very not just organized, but like married to the mission. It's the only position in all of sports that your primary job is to protect somebody else. And so you take that seriously. Like you're protecting the quarterback, you're protecting the running back. And so you take that idea of protection really seriously, and it becomes like a lifestyle. It's not just a job you do, it's just like, it's kind of who you are. You're a protector of people. And so you take that seriously. And so you take the criticism of it seriously, but you take the attention to your craft super seriously. And so most of the time, like if they have like the Wonderlic test that they used to take at the combine, well, tackles, especially left tackles, would be like in the scoring like the top 2 or 3, because it's a very cerebral position. You're thinking about things, you're having to recognize defensive fronts, understand, body position, if someone's like giving away like what type of rush or blitz or whatever they're going to do. So very cerebral position. And if you're playing with a guy like Peyton Manning, you have to be able to have 5 or 6 or 7 plays stored in your head, because you never know what he's going to change to when he gets up to the line of scrimmage. You know what I'm saying? And so there's a lot that has to go into it. And then also, I hate when people say like, oh, these are the big guys and those are the skilled guys. And it's like, okay, like if you think about it, if you have a receiver that can run fast, like, yeah, it's a skill, but like usually you're just born with that skill. You can just run fast. Now they just got to train you how to like run a route. That's the skill piece of it. But offensive linemen, like every part of it is a learned skill. Like the footwork, they have to play with your pads down. You have to block some of the best athletes on the field as you're going backwards and they're going forwards. Like people don't even think about that. Like I'm 330 pounds and I'm playing against one of the best athletes on the field, and he's 6'4" and 250 pounds, running 4.4, 4.5 40s, stuff like that. And you have to block this dude as you're going backwards. Like, you have to physically move a 300-pound dude, 1 or 2 or 3 yards. Like it takes skill and toughness and fight and grit and all of that to do that. It is not easy. It's really hard to do. And so that's just kind of like the mentality of and we're not like, want to be in the media and like, trying to get a whole lot of attention brought to ourselves, because there's enough of it anyway, as soon as you mess something up, And then I would say, like, especially at the guard and center positions, there's not a whole lot of difference in like the approach to it. But at least when I came to lead, the difference between right tackle and left tackle is that most teams are right-handed. And so they run a lot of plays to the right. And so in the running game, you always wanted like a bigger, physical dude on the right side that anchored the running game. And then you wanted this more athletic dude on the left side that's pass blocking the best pass rusher on the blind side of the quarterback. Well, now you have more left-handed quarterbacks. You're running out of shotgun and stuff like that. And so the idea around blind side isn't as big as it used to be, but you're still pass blocking, usually the best pass blocker on the team. But however, now everybody can rush the quarterback, so like the right tackle has to be skilled at pass blocking too. But generally speaking, the right tackle is a bigger physical run blocker, anchor dude, and the left tackle can run block, but his specialty is protecting the backside of the quarterback. So a little bit more athletic left tackles.
Was it a big adjustment for you when you played when you blocked for Scott Ramsey for the Lions? It was the first time I think in your career you had extended time playing with a left-handed quarterback. So did you have to adjust? Did you have to adjust to that because he's left-handed? So now teams aren't going to change the whole formation and bring in fast guys on that they're playing in front of you, but all of a sudden you have your strong side now. Did it change things for you?
Yeah, no, not really, because you're still pass blocking the best dudes, going Chris Dolman and John Randall and all those guys. They don't care if your quarterback's right or left-handed. It's like you better stop him from getting there. And so it didn't really. The only thing that changed for me is like usually a right-hand quarterback is going to scramble to the right, so because they can throw this way. Mm-hmm. And then I had to get used to Scott when he was escaping pressure moving to the left, and so making sure that like I could still when I could feel the pressure of the defensive lineman changing, that they weren't just going to chase the ball, that maybe Scott might be scrambling out to that side. Because usually like when you're pass blocking, you can feel them kind of release pressure, the ball's gone and they're pursuing the ball. And then or the quarterback's scrambling that way, so they're running that way. And then I just had to make this one little change where as they started release pressure, I had to make sure that like Scott wasn't scrambling to my side because he's left-handed and feels more comfortable throwing that way.
Yeah, I interviewed a guy named Pat Toomey. He played for the Cowboys and the Raiders in the 70s. And he said the Raiders were so tough because they had Art Shell and Gene Upshaw on the left side. And they were so big. And so, as you were saying before, they were blocking the speed guys on that side of the field. So no one could stop the run. And then Stabler would have so much time to throw because you couldn't stop Marv Hubbard and Van Egan and Kenny King and all the running backs they had. So it's one of those things probably the casual fan may not pick up on. And I learned that from Pat, but it's interesting.
Well, I do like a lot of sports radio out here. And so what I do is I try to educate people on offensive line play, because most people think it's just big dudes running into big guys and the strongest person is going to win. And it's like so much more than that, And so the Seahawks let me break down film from time to time and just talk about footwork and body angle and all this other kind of stuff, hand placement, all the technical stuff that it takes to be an offensive lineman. So I enjoy doing that.
Yeah. Well, look, let's get back to UVA. Your redshirt season's over. You're finally start. I think you started every game of the next 4 years. Yeah. So what was your first year like? And it was also your first season playing the offensive line.
Yeah. So the cool thing was that you got to block for Shawn Moore. And Shawn is one of the most dynamic leaders I've ever been around. Like you never felt like you can be down 59-0 and it's 2 minutes left in the game, and Shawn will make you feel like we're going to score 60 points in 2 minutes, and so it was really cool to be in the huddle with Shawn. But I can remember early on, we played like Penn State, and I still was maturing in the locker room. I mean, in the weight room, and these dudes look like grown men, and I was just like, whoa, like these are big brothers, and I used to like try to get under people's skin. And so like whenever, let's say their tackle was made and they're just kind of running up to the pile, I would just go pick them off. Bop. And so I was doing that to all these Penn State dudes. And then they were getting angry, man. They had beards and stuff. I was like, man, these dudes are like 30 years old, it looks like out here. And but I remember like that was one of the first games where I was like, all right, this is big boy football. And I did all right as a redshirt freshman against, the big boy football. And that just kind of helped build my confidence. And then, then as we went on, not to say that it wasn't hard, but it just didn't it felt effortless. So then it was just a matter of me getting strong enough to really start to exert my dominance and not just be able to block somebody, but to be able to just dominate them. So I went to Coach Gamble, John Gamble, our strength coach, the following summer. I'm like, dude, like I'm staying in Charlottesville. I'm not going home. Anytime you in the weight room, I'm in the weight room. and so that's kind of how I just built by the time I left there, like I had most of the lifting records. And when I first got there, we had to do 225 for reps. I couldn't do it one time. And I had to go do it I had to go do like 180 with the defensive backs. And I think I did it 3 times. And then by the time I left there, I had bench press almost 500 pounds, power squat like 500 or 600 pounds, power clean 400 or 500 pounds. Like I had all the all the Olympic lifts, I had all the records, and I know some dudes have broken them since then, but that was another part of it. Like my relationship with John was unbelievable too, because that was so instrumental in my growth as a player.
Yeah. Well, in your defense, you have very long arms. That makes bench pressing much harder.
Yeah.
You're probably much stronger than you actually would seem. So,
Right.
well, one of the seminal moments in UVA football history is the next year we opened up with Notre Dame and Penn State, 2 huge games, and we ended up beating Penn State.
Yeah.
And I think we'd won the bowl game, I think, the year before against Brigham Young. That was a nice moment as well.
Yeah.
But I know that Penn State win was a big win. That was your I believe your sophomore, your redshirt sophomore year.
Yeah. So I think we would have played better against Notre Dame. I think we're all a little bit, I don't want to say starstruck, but it was just like, man, this is Notre Dame. You know what I'm saying? And so because the second half of that game, we played really good football. I think they only scored once in the second half, and we scored a couple different times. And so we played much better in the second half than we did the first half. But that was like the second half is what then propelled us to be ready to play Penn State. And it was just like, all right, like we can do this, and we have talent just as well as anyone else. And we knew we were going into Happy Valley, but we were ready for that game. We knew we had playmakers, Shawn and Herman, and had the offensive line that was ready to go. We had some ballers on defense. I remember that was, I think, Chris Slade's first action was against Penn State, and I think his first play he sacked the quarterback or something like that. It was just like, it's like, yeah, this dude can play. And so then as the game went on, even though it was a tight game a lot, like we just felt like we're going to win the football game because we felt like we're a better team, and because of that early experience with Notre Dame and the way we played the second half, we just had a different confidence, on our team, and then it just pretty much carried us through the rest of that season. I think that's the season we won 10 games. I think it was. And yeah.
Yeah, I remember that Penn State game. Somehow, middle linebacker Ray Savage is in the end zone making an interception to ensure the victory. That was an amazing moment. So let's go to what's probably one of the most important seasons in the history of UVA football, maybe UVA sports. And we became number 1 in the country. We beat Clemson early, which was a huge moment for us because this is before Florida State was in the ACC. Clemson was the premier team in the ACC, and North Carolina was probably second. But then it was always Clemson. We beat Clemson, and then we lose. We end up losing to Maryland. I'm sorry. Was it Georgia Tech or Maryland? Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
And then that kind of slowed, and that was after we became number 1. Do you ever think about that season? I mean, you had this illustrious career. Does that season still mean a lot to you? And what are your memories of that season?
Yeah, no, that season, it means a lot to me in a bunch of different ways because, like you said, first we beat Clemson, and they had beaten us like 29 straight times. It was the longest winning streak any one team had over another team in the whole country. And but we knew in camp that we were going to be a good football team. We just knew it. Like we just had too many weapons on offense, and our defense was good enough. And anchored with Ray and Chris Slade, and our secondary, was had the ability to intercept a lot of balls with I think we had like Keith McMeans and Covington and Jason and Tyrone Lewis. And so we knew that we had like a really good football team. And then as we started playing, people just started really buying into it and not just going like, I think we're good. Like, it's like, no, we're good. And now it's just a matter of just every day, just every game, putting together a good game. I remember we went to play, I think Kansas that year. I think we played Kansas that year.
I think so.
And they were like talking like, oh, well, we play Nebraska and we do this. And then like we in Virginia and we beat them like 59-0. And it was like easy. It was like, I think I was out of the game by like the third quarter. It was just like, we were just rolling people up. And then the Clemson game was monumental because we just needed to, if we were going to be anything, if we wanted to claim anything about Virginia football, we had to win that game. And I can remember we were close, we're going into the hill, and it was like a third down play, and we called a timeout and went to the sideline, and we're trying to figure out what to do. And I just went over and I said, dude, just run behind me. I'm going to score with my dude. and if whoever's behind me, they're gonna score too. And we we gave it to Terry Kirby, and he was behind Gary Steele at fullback. We went to the left side, and if you ever watch the video, me and my dude were almost in the back of the end zone, and Terry came right behind us, and that kind of sealed the win for us. And that was like the adrenaline and stuff that just went through my body when I dumped my guy on the ground. I looked back and I could see Terry coming into the end zone, because I think he like dove over a couple people. It was just like something I've never experienced before. And then, the crowd was just going nuts. And at the time, the stadium only sat like 40,000 people or something, but it felt like 200,000 people, especially after we won the game and everybody rushed the field, and like my big old self, they were picking me up. And I'm just like, okay, like whatever, but yeah, that was awesome. And then the Georgia Tech game, like that was brutal, man. Because I don't know if people remember, but we actually scored a touchdown to take a bigger lead, but then we didn't have enough men because the tight end didn't come in the game. So we didn't have enough people on the line of scrimmage. And so then we had to back up and go at it again, and we didn't get in and didn't score. So we had to kick a field goal. And then that only put us up by like 1 point or something. Then they kicked the long field goal to win it. And but that was that game we had complete control over.
Complete control. You had subs in the game in the first half, right?
Yeah, we were up like 21-0 or 21-7 in the first half, and then the second half it was just a series of unfortunate events. We threw a swing pass out to the running back, it bounces off his face, and they intercepted. And then Shawn Moore was running down the line of scrimmage. Paul Collins cut one of their players, and it was either their player or Paul's foot kicked up in the air, knocked the ball out of Shawn's hand, and then they recovered. And so that put them in a position to get right back in the game. Like those two plays put them right back in the game. And then it was a dogfight. It was going to come down to whoever got the ball last. And they got the ball last and was able to kick Scott Session, I think was his name, kicked like a 50-yard field goal or something like that. So it was just like, man. And then the Maryland game.
Hold on, real quick about that. Did you ever talk to Bobby Ross about that game?
Oh yeah, because Bobby Ross ended up being my coach in Detroit, and I was a team captain, and so we talked about that a lot. Like we would joke about it all the time, or I give him a hard time about it, or I'd start giving him a hard time about something. He'll be like, "Hey, remember that game when we're number 6 and y'all were number 1, and we came into your house?" And I'd be like, "Hey, stop, coach! Like you're too old for me to punch in the face." Like, but then that field goal kicker kicked for the Chicago Bears, and in 1 year in Detroit, all we had to do was beat the Bears in the last game, and we end up 10-6, and we go to the playoffs. And this dude had a 51-yard field goal, and I said, man, they're like, oh, he's not gonna make it. I'm like, dude, I've seen him make it. And he made it. And so we ended up 9-7, and we didn't make the playoffs. And that's when they changed everything at Detroit. And Matt Millen came in, and the program just went after that. But I was just like, man, I've lost to this dude twice on 50-yard field goals when on games where it absolutely mattered. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't just some random game. It was one to get to the playoffs, and the other one's to stay number 1 in the country. So it was just like, it was, I just wanted to put that dude in the headlock.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to the Maryland game. First of all, you go on the road and you beat North Carolina, which is not easy because, right. I mean, you got to be down after being number 1 in the country and losing a huge lead. But you get back on your feet, beat UNC on the road, and then we have Maryland at home.
Yeah, and then the Maryland game, like, I don't know if we maybe took them a little bit lightly, but it was just a pesky kind of game the whole time. Like, we just couldn't really kind of get the rhythm going on offense, and then they were just doing enough on their offense to kind of stay in the game. And then I don't know if you guys remember, but there was a play going towards Bryant Hall, and I think Shawn was rolling to the left and was trying to throw the ball like this, and when he landed, that's when he messed his thumb up.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it just, then I think either Bobby Goodman or Matt Blunden, I can't remember which one came in or if Shawn finished that game, but the following game, it was the combination of those two that kind of came in. And then the season kind of was just a dogfight from that point on, just trying to, when you don't have Shawn Moore, you don't have probably 50% of what you do on offense, And, but yeah, that game, I remember, I have a picture where I was so frustrated. It just seemed like we just could not. We'd have 2 or 3 good plays, and then 2 or 3 not so good plays, and then we get a drive started, then we'd stall, like all that kind of stuff. And I was getting so frustrated. And so I got into this they had a defensive lineman, Larry Webster, who ended up playing in the league too. And he's a big guy. And I have this picture of me and him like, going at it, because I was just so frustrated. Like, I always played with the edge anyway, but I just felt like if I could like get like a little fight going, it would create more energy on our team, and then we would just kind of rise up. But we let them stay in it too long. We should have put them away on offense and then let our defense do what they do. But we let them hang around enough, and they ended up getting a win.
Yeah, it was a tough way, and then the season kind of unraveled. We got crushed by Tech. We put in a good performance in the Sugar Bowl. I thought Shawn played really well, but he couldn't pass the ball on the way we needed him to. But he still had a heroic effort. But then the next year, it was almost the season was the exact opposite of the year before, in that we had a couple losses early, and then by the end of the year, we were flying. We were killing everybody, and we ended up playing in Oklahoma, I believe.
Oklahoma in the Sugar Bowl. I mean, in the Gator Bowl.
Yeah. So what about that year? Because we ended up at the end of the year, we were playing as good as any team in the country.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that really helped us that year was that, Matt Blunden was a big time quarterback in high school, and then came to UVA and just kind of put more of his attention on the basketball team. And I think it just took a few games for Matt to be like, right, like I am good at this. And because then he became a different dude, he ended up being the ACC Player of the Year and stuff. That's in football. Right, yeah. And but when his light bulb came on, that's kind of when we started rolling, because we had backfield, Jared Washington and Kirby, and we had good enough receivers and stuff like that. It just in a good offensive line. I was playing with Mark Dixon, who was another All-American player for us, who was. You want to talk about a phenomenal athlete? This dude was like a phenomenal athlete too. And so once the dude that touched the ball the most, the light bulb came on for him, then we were rolling, and we felt like we could beat anybody in the country, because we had, we thought we had, I think Matt Blunden went at the time, set like the NCAA record for the most pass attempts without an interception, like 250 or 60 pass attempts that year without an interception. So he took care of the ball, and he was making big plays, in the passing game. I think we had Tyrone Davis, I think. Mm-hmm. And so we felt really good about, how we finished the year. Obviously we wanted to start out faster, but we finished super strong. And then in the Gator Bowl, I think we underestimated them, because we were like, man, if we can just make them throw the ball, because they were a big power running team, we can just make them throw the ball. We got them. Well, that dude went for like 30 for 32 or something like that throwing the ball. And then I kind of tweaked my back and right around halftime. And then Coach Welsh was like, man, like your future is ahead of you. Like, we're not going to, risk getting you hurt. So then most of the second half, I didn't play in that game because I was having back spasms and stuff on the sideline. But I remember there was a defensive lineman they had that I played against. He played for the Giants, and so I played against him in the NFL. And that whole time, like, he was like, you're not going to get me. You're not going to get me. And I'm like, dude, I'm going to play this whole game to get you one time. Like, I don't care if it's the last play of the game, I'll get you one time. And then I never got to get him because I didn't play most of the second half. Yeah.
Well, look, man, a great college career. You get drafted 10th by Seattle. Mm-hmm. As we mentioned earlier, you go up there and play with my boy Chris Warren, and Coach Tom Flores. Yeah. My Pat Toomey, who I mentioned earlier, played for Tom Flores. He was a guy that kind of a quiet guy, kind of a different personality, at least in the media, than the typical coaching stereotype. So what was it like, the adjustment into the NFL? Was it easier than the adjustment to the ACC? And tell us a little bit about your first year. Yeah.
So first of all, Coach Flores, I'm forever indebted to that dude, because he's the guy that pulled the trigger to draft me. And so it's also cool that he was like the first, person of color to win the Super Bowl and Hall of Fame and all that kind of stuff as a coach. And so it's just really cool to be connected to Coach Flores that way. And he was a really quiet dude, but he was an intense dude. Like, you can see the intensity and just how he talked and his presence. But my first year, I held out of camp like the first couple of weeks trying to get my contract negotiated and all that stuff. And when I came in, the first day of practice, I had this dude named Rufus Porter, who was an undersized outside linebacker, but quick as all get out. and we had to go do one-on-one pass rush the entire period. It was just me against him. Like nobody else went. They were just like, you've been out for 2 weeks. You're taking every one of these reps. And I was a little bit nervous because this dude was like quick. I hadn't pass blocked against NFL dudes before. But after like the first couple, I was pretty good. And I pretty much won the whole session. And so that kind of gave me a little bit of confidence. And then it was just about adjusting to the speed of the game, because that was the biggest deal, is like everybody is good. Like even the person that you rank as the worst defensive end in the NFL is really good. Is better than any college player that you probably played against, and so you had to be prepared for that. And my rookie year, I can't say that I was always prepared for that, because I would look at names and go like, oh, I'm playing against Lawrence Taylor today, or hey, I'm playing against Howie Long today. And then I'd see some name I didn't know, and I'd be like, oh, I don't even know who this dude is, and then that would be the dude that gave me the most problems, what I'm saying? Stuff like that. So the mental part of the game was an adjustment. The physical part was no problem. It was just like mentally the approach to the game. So my first 4 or 5 games in the league, it was like tough sledding. And I'm sure that like some of the fans and stuff were probably like, man, what the heck? Like, who do we draft? But it just took me that I had missed camp. And so when I came in there already playing preseason games. And so I was just trying to catch up and everything. And then the rest of my, like the last 10 games or whatever, I played really good football to the point where like that offseason, I think I was ranked like the 15th out of all the tackles, right and left tackles. I was like ranked number 15 or something like that. And then our team wasn't good. We were 2-14. I wasn't used to losing, so that was bothering me. At UVA, we won a lot of football games, and all of a sudden now we can't even win a quarter. And it was just like, oh my God, but we didn't have quarterback. Chris was our running back, so we could run the ball on anybody. I think we were in the AFC West at the time. I think Chris led the league at the AFC West in rushing that year, but we went through about 3 quarterbacks: Stan Gelbaugh, Dan McGuire, Kelly Stauffer. We just and then our best receiver was Brian Blades, who missed half the season holding out for contract stuff. So we just didn't have any, if they stopped our running game, we didn't have anything on offense. It may have been one of the worst offenses statistically in the history of the league. I think we averaged 8 points a game. And at the times, I think our punter set the record for the most punts in the season. And so we were terrible on offense. And the thing that was crazy is our defense was a top 10 defense in the league. Our defense was so good. Our team was so bad. Like our offense was so bad that Sports Illustrated named our defensive coordinator as the coach of the year.
What was
his name was Tom Catlin. And he was an older dude at the time. But our defense was balling out. They were like they were creating turnovers. They'd be like, we get y'all the ball back, and we couldn't do anything with it. I think we may have had the most 3 and outs and stuff like that. Like it's just terrible offense. Wow. And that was hard. That was really hard because pro fans are different than college fans. They just riding you the whole time. And my fiance sitting in the stands and hearing people talking, saying stuff about me and all this other kind of stuff. That was just hard stuff to deal with. Hearing about it on the radio. I was the rookie Ray Roberts for the whole first year. Like, I'm like, my name is Ray, not Rookie. And so, but every article, the rookie Ray Roberts, the rookie Ray Roberts, the rookie Ray Roberts. And so yeah, the first year was tough, just getting started, like getting my feet up under me in this league, but then also having to deal with all the losing. I think we won like the 3rd game of the year, and then we didn't win again until like week 14 or something like that. It was just bad football.
So were you surprised at how successful Chris Warren was in the NFL? So he'd gone to UVA with us. I went to high school with Chris at Robinson here in Fairfax, and Chris played defense his first year at UVA. He played as a freshman, and then he ran the ball, had a good sophomore year. I think he had some fumbles one year and maybe lost a little bit of confidence in him. And next thing we know, he was gone, and he had this incredible career at Ferrum College. And it just became a 4-year college when just about the time he joined. Were you surprised that he was able to get himself together and have this great NFL career?
Well, the thing that was interesting is that Chris had been on academic probation, and then he came back, and for one spring, I practiced with Chris, and so I got to see like all this athleticism, and I can remember like the publications were anticipating him being back on the team, and so like I think one thing had him as preseason all conference running back, preseason all conference like returner, and then just in case preseason all conference defensive back. Like I was like, this dude is like phenomenal athlete, and so like I've seen him like catch punts, like the ball is coming and then he'll wait at the last minute and like catch it behind his back, stuff like that. Like, and he was so smooth that we were training, and John had us running these 40s, and he didn't think that Chris was running hard enough. And so he put like Keith McMeans like 5 yards in front of him and said, catch Keith before you get to the thing. And it still didn't look like he was running hard. And he just ran right past him, And so it's just like, this dude's just smooth, man. He's just a smooth athlete. And so then he ended up, not being able to stay at UVA and went to Ferrum. And so like every Sunday morning, like everybody on our team would get up and see what Chris did. Like everybody wanted, and he'd rush for 300 yards in one half, stuff like that. And so I already knew what Chris was capable of when I came to Seattle. And so then it was just a matter of us putting an offensive line in front of him to let him do what he does. And so it was really awesome to be able to lead the way for a dude that I knew that had some UVA in him, and I already had this connection to him. And so like we would be in the huddle and they called the play, and he'd be like, "Big Ray, I'm coming." And I'm like, "All right, I got you, bro. Like we're going." And so it was really cool to be able to block for him. And I think maybe people around here were surprised that, he was on the Virginia and coming out here in Seattle, and people didn't know much about him in his first year in the league. I think it was basically like the kickoff returner. And but then once we started going, his confidence grew, and his understanding of, our plays and us understanding how he runs. It was just a beautiful thing, man. Like if there's one thing we could do, we could run the football. We may not have been able to throw it and score a lot of points, but we're going to run the football. And so it's really cool to be able to see Chris do that, and be able people to see his athleticism and his power and his speed. It just looked like he's not running, but people can't catch him, and then they underestimate how hard he ran. Like he was so smooth, you couldn't tell that he was running with power. So when you come through the hole and lower his pads, dudes would be surprised at like, oh shoot, I forgot this dude is like 6'2", 220 something pounds, And so it was awesome to see him be able to do that.
I like Chris a lot, and he was a quiet guy in high school, even though he's a great guy. We were friends, but like I said, Chris is kind of a private guy, and I hadn't seen Chris really since UVA. I hadn't seen him, and he showed up at my father's funeral. 30 years later, 20 years later, he shows up at my father's funeral just to support me. And I hadn't seen him in so long. I didn't even know how he knew about it. But that's the kind of guy Chris is. Now, technically, is it very different blocking for a speedy power runner like Chris than it is blocking for Barry Sanders, a scat back?
Yeah, it took, because the thing about Chris is like, if we're going to run the ball to the left side between the tackle and the guard, that's what Chris is. That's where he's going to hit the hole. Mm-hmm. And so you knew like, okay, like we need to get movement right here. Like, and if you're like on the backside of a play, you knew that Chris would kind of let you know like when he's going to cut it back. You know what I'm saying? All of a sudden I go to Detroit and I think my first couple of days in practice, I may have tackled Barry more than anybody because I couldn't get out of the way. Like I didn't know what he was doing and he didn't know what I was doing. And I was just like, wow, like it's going to take some getting used to, like, especially like on the backside of a play. Like I get my little cutoff and then I'm just kind of chilling and all of a sudden, oh shoot, there's Barry, like right there, you know? And so what I learned is that if you want to see how great Barry is, you just got to wait to watch the film. And you just need to block until the whistle blows, and just know that Barry's going to do his thing. And so that took me a little bit of an adjustment. So then it was just like, it didn't matter where you, like Herman, receivers, it didn't matter. Like if you're blocking, don't be trying to look to see where Barry is, just block. And then we can watch the film on Monday and see all the crazy stuff that he did, you know, because at first I was, I knew how dynamic he was. So if we're supposed to be running to the right, I'm getting my little cutoff on the backside, but I'm trying to look and see what who Barry's ankle's about to break, you know what I'm saying? And the next thing you know, he's like right here. And I'm like, oh shoot, like, you know, and so it did take a little bit of an adjustment to get used to that. And I remember the year we rushed for 2,000 yards with Barry. After the first 2 games, he had only rushed for 53 yards. And Coach Ross was there. I don't think Coach Ross really was buying into how we needed to run the football. And so we had this big meeting. Offensive coordinator Tom Moore called me, Herman, Don Mikowski was on the team at the time, and then Barry, and there's a couple other dudes. And he was like, you know, what should we do? And I said, look, man, like, I don't get paid to call the plays. I said, but if you're gonna ask me, I'd run Barry until his freaking shoes fell off, and then I just put new shoes on him and keep running him again. I'm like, because this dude is the best weapon we got, and he's not touching the ball. And then from that meeting on, we rushed for 2,000 yards in 14 games, which was exactly what OJ did.
That's right.
And so because he finished with 2,053 yards. And so, and then we rushed 14 straight games of 100 yards or more, which was a record at the time. I think it might still be the record. But yeah, Barry was a different dude to block for, just because he was disciplined into how he was with his talent. But as far as like saying like, hey, you're going to hit the front side A gap. Yeah, I might hit the backside C gap. Like, you know what I'm saying? So you just had to be ready for any of that, you know, and just let him do what he does and just cover people up, you know.
Was he as humble a guy as he seems?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So Barry and I were like the offensive team captains while I was there. And Robert Porcher, I think, was on defense, but usually it was me doing the talking to the team. And so we'd have these little moments during the season where we need to have just an all player meeting. And I'd be like, hey, Barry, like, we need to pull the team together and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. He'd be like, you got it. I'm like, nah, they need to hear from you, bro. Like, you're the future Hall of Famer. I'm just this dude that blocks, you know? And he'd be like, nah, you got it, Ray. And so then I'd get up there and I'd be like, hey, Barry wants me to tell y'all. I'd always act like it was something that Barry told me to tell them. And so he just never was really comfortable like in front like that and speaking and like doing interviews and stuff like that. Super humble dude, quiet dude, and not like the stars of today, which this dude, of any player who had a legitimate beef to go to the front office and could say like, I should have some say in something, it would have been Barry Sanders. And Barry never did that. Even like in games where he should have touched the ball more, he just carried it as many times they gave it to him. Win, lose, or draw, he's gonna shower and go home and come back the next day. Like, and but this dude had every reason to be in the front office saying we need better this, or we need to change that, or I need this, but he was just never that guy. He just showed up with his lunch pail and went to work and went home, and was just real super quiet that way. Really super appreciative and like really understood like what the 2,000 yards meant for our offensive line. And so he was, you know, had bought into it that way, but it wasn't, I think that he enjoyed the accomplishment, but I don't know that he would have much rather gone deep into the playoffs than to rush for 2,000 yards, you know, that kind of a thing. But super humble dude, super nice guy, easy, approachable dude. You may not get a whole lot out of him, but you know, he's an approachable, good dude, nice guy. Took us out to dinner, like stuff like that. So you know, sent the offensive line to Hawaii, you know, the year he rushed for 2,000 yards, sent us all with our wives and families, paid for it, everything.
Oh, that's awesome.
To Hawaii, like that kind of stuff. So real good dude.
Yeah. Well, Ray, you started almost every game of your career, college and pro, but you didn't play a lot for Dennis Erickson, who came in after Flores. Yeah. What happened with Coach Erickson, and was that the reason why you ended up going to Detroit?
Yeah. So the year before Coach Erickson came, I broke my leg and dislocated my foot in week 14. And so I had probably like 4 or 5 surgeries to try to correct it. And I was just having some issues where every time it was my left foot, every time I would kick on my pass sets, it felt like I was stepping on a knife. It was hurting like really bad. And so then about right before training camp started, I had to go in for another surgery. And so then I missed all the training camp, and then I missed like the first 4 or 5 games because I was still rehabbing. And then when I was ready to come back, the offensive line was in like a really good little rhythm, and they were like, man, like we don't want to we don't want to mess up the chemistry that we have right now. And so we're going to just kind of find you and the left tackle can kind of alternate series and stuff like that. And I'm just like, man, okay, whatever, bro. Like, I'm better than this dude, but you know, it is what it is. I remember calling my dad and was just like, Dad, like this is not right, man. Like, I should be playing. And my dad just said, my dad was a real spiritual dude. And he's like, you know what? Like, just help the dude in front of you and it'll come back to you someday, but just be a good teammate. And so I just tried to help that dude as best I could and got to play where I could. And then I was back then they had the franchise tag and a transition tag. And so I was a transitional player for the Seahawks. And the kid that was playing that had filled in for me was making like the league minimum. And so they were like, man, like, we can pay this dude the average of the top 10 positions, or we can pay this guy $300,000. And so they decided that one, they thought my ankle was still jacked up. And then two, financially, they just felt like they could save money going that way. And so they never even offered me a contract as when I was a free agent. And so then I had to I wasn't getting very many. So that's why I didn't play a lot with Coach Erickson. It was mostly the injury thing and less of my ability. And so then as I was a free agent, teams were like going like, well, man, like, we know you're the best lineman there, but you weren't playing. Like, so your ankle must be really jacked up. And so I had to I called John Clayton, rest in peace, who's a beat writer for he was like the Adam Schefter before Adam Schefter. And so I called John and was like, John, like, why aren't these teams calling me? And he's like, Ray, like, they think your ankle's messed up. If I was you, I would go get like a second opinion from a different doctors and have them send that stuff out. And so that's what me and my agent did. And then the team started calling. And so then I had offers from the Raiders, the Panthers, the Texans, the Lions. There's probably like 3 or 4 of the teams, and I visited those teams, and then probably had a better contract from the Raiders. But when I went to Detroit, Herman was there, Herman and Don Mikowski, and then all of a sudden we had Greg Jeffries and Chris Harrison and Dwayne Ashman and what's the other receiver? Shoot, his name just went on the top of my head.
Oh yeah.
But so it was like, and then Matt Blunden ended up coming. So it was just like UVA Midwest, if you want to call it that. And so I just bought into what Herman was telling me about the team, and so that's why I signed with Detroit.
Yeah. So Detroit has this Thanksgiving tradition. They always play the first game on Thanksgiving Day. I don't know how far it goes back, but it must be at least 60 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean to a Detroit player? If you're a pro player, is it kind of annoying because you want to be with your family, or do you enjoy it because you're on national television and it's such a tradition?
Well, I think if you're the team if you're the opponent, it can be annoying because you don't do it every year. You know what I'm saying? But for Detroit, because you do it every year, it becomes Thanksgiving. You know what I'm saying? It just becomes how you celebrate Thanksgiving, and it's a big deal, and I know the NFL a couple of times have tried to take Detroit off that lineup, and the ownership from Detroit was like, no, like, we were here when this started, like, this is what we do, like, it doesn't matter if we lose every time, this is our spot. And back then it was cool because it was the only game. But then when like the NFL Network came, then they started doing like these double games, and but it was really cool to be like the only show on during Thanksgiving. You knew that everybody that was any type of football fan, whether they're Detroit Lion fan or if they were a Green Bay Packer fan or Dallas Cowboy fan, they're watching that game because that's what you do on Thanksgiving. You turn on the Thanksgiving game. So you knew that like the whole freaking country is watching that game. And so that kind of brought different energy to it as well, And so, and then as a family, you just kind of get used to how you celebrate around that. But I always loved it. Like I only missed one. I was injured one game, I think against Kansas City, we played on Thanksgiving. I missed that game, but the rest of them I made. And it was always awesome. It's just an awesome feeling that you knew like as soon as you got the schedule, you look to that game, like who we playing on Thanksgiving, you know what I'm saying? And so that was a big deal in Detroit for the fans and for the players and for the organization.
Yeah. Well, look, Ray, last question. I kept you much longer than you promised me, but you're such a great storyteller. Just tell us a little bit about your post-football transition. I mean, football was such a huge part of your life, and I know you have this incredible job with the Special Olympics takes you around the country. I mean, you're a great radio voice, TV. I'm sure you have, a bright career in broadcasting, which you've already been doing the last several years. But just to take us through your post-football careers and some of your highs and lows.
Yeah, so probably the biggest low, man, was that I was depressed like crazy after I retired. Like I could not get out of the bed. I just got out of the bed, got on the couch, back to the bed, back to the couch. I just couldn't figure out, and I always fancied myself as like one of the smarter, more prepared dudes. And then all of a sudden there was no football and I had no identity. I didn't know what I could bring to the world or, all these different kinds of things. And I had my middle son at the time was our youngest, and he was probably like 6 or 7 or 5 or 6 or something. And I heard him tell his mom, I just want my dad back. And then that just kind of like woke me up one day. And believe it or not, I was reading the newspaper, which no one knows of nowadays. And I saw this article about this master's program at the University of Washington around being athletic director. And I was like, man, I think that's what I want to do. And so I called them because the deadline to apply was like the next day. And so I called and like used my celebrity to buy some time to take the exams and all that kind of stuff. And then got into that program. And then while I was in that program, we did a lot of like diversity, equity, inclusion stuff. And then I got drawn to that more than I did the athletic director thing. And so I took this job at Microsoft as a diversity, equity, inclusion specialist in the gaming division, just because I wanted to understand, what it was and what it was all about. And so I did had never done research before in my life. And I did this research for Microsoft around the gaming utilization for women, African-Americans, Native Americans, and the Hispanic community. And so I did research for about 3 years around that stuff. And for them around like who buys it, who plays it, like the size of the remotes, the types of games, what is actually happening within the game. So like I've ended up finding this group in Atlanta called Big Wigs, which stands for Blacks in Gaming and Women in Gaming. And they would talk about like even the actual characters being misrepresented inside the game. And I was just like, wow, like I never thought about that part of it. So I took that back to Microsoft, like all kind of stuff like that. So I just really got into this diversity space. And then I was really interested in who had access to education. And so I would go to all these different conferences around school, K through 12, and ask a bunch of questions. And then people are like, so what do you teach? I'm like, I don't teach. Or are you the principal? No, I'm not the principal. What are you doing here? I'm like, I'm just trying to understand. Like, that's all. I'm just trying to understand what's going on. So then I ended up working with this program here in Seattle called Rainier Scholars, which is an academic and college enrichment program for low-income kids of color who are first-generation college candidates. So I worked closely with the families because a lot of the families were single parent, or they didn't graduate, they didn't go to college, or they didn't graduate high school. So just supporting them on how to support these kids that we were really putting a lot of expectations on, and college level work in 4th and 5th grade and stuff like that, just really helping them support their kids in that effort. And then did a little high school football coaching, a little high school basketball coaching, and then Special Olympics came around, and I just felt like this job with Special Olympics. Oh, and in between there, I was a life skills director at UVA for the football team for about 4 or 5 years. That didn't quite turn out to what I wanted it to be. So then I came back to Seattle. And then I ended up with Special Olympics, which to me utilizes, this is my purpose for being on the face of the earth. Like not to play football or not to be the radio voice, but to help be the voice of people that are so marginalized that we forget about them. And so that's where my passion is to bring our resources and outcomes to them so they have a life worth living, and that they know that their life matters, that they were born to matter. And then I do everything I can to make sure that we get our resources and outcomes to that population.
Wow. Well, Ray, that's great, man. Look, I really appreciate you telling us your life story. You started off, very modest home from good working people, and you've accomplished so much. And now you're giving back. And so you've had this great career. I really appreciate you spending time with me today. Maybe one of these days we can, we can bump into each other in Charlottesville, have a coffee or a beer or something. It'd be great to see you in person.
Oh, I appreciate it, man. And like I said, I've been watching these from afar, and so it was funny that you asked, because I was like, man, like I want to be on there. And then like honestly, like the next day after having that thought is when you hit me up on the on the messenger. And so I appreciate it. I like this kind of stuff. I can talk forever. So if you want to drill down on one aspect of it at a different time, like we can do that. Like I love telling stories. I think that's a strength of mine. I think that's where people find a lot of connection.
I would love to do that. I was just trying to be respectful of your time. And I actually heard you, I listened to a few of your podcasts, and you're very good at it. And I really enjoyed you and Cove and Hawk. It was because you guys have such a bond. And I almost felt like we were in the locker room talking about, the game.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, anytime, man, anytime you want to hit me back up or talk about something else or whatever, just hit me up, man. I'm always available.
Yeah, maybe we could talk during the season. That'd be great to hear your analysis of the games as well.
Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah, great. Okay, Ray, have a great day. Brother. I appreciate you, man.
Thank you. Wahoo wah.
All right, all right, buddy. Have a good day.
Peace.
Peace.